around at this point?
Right. So, Natasha, I'll give you really just the latest from what I'm looking at right now before my eyes, which is a very, very large fire that is still raging on the coastline of the city of Escalation. It's on the southern part of the city, very close to Gaza. We have a live feed of that, which you can maybe make it out there if you could still see it. But essentially, we're talking about what appears to be, right, so it appears to be some sort of fuel, petrol. We're not exactly sure what's inside the pipeline, but something that is causing a very, very, very large fire to be raging on. And at times, from the distance that we're standing, with buildings that are several tens of meters high, you can see even flames. So this is just the latest example that we can see before our eyes. But in that same area that you might still be seeing on your screen was also the site, Natasha, of many rocket barrages, not Iron Dome interceptor missiles, but barrages of rockets, some of which, indeed, we understand landed in central Israel. And, of course, we heard from the leaders of Israel, both the defense leader and the Israeli prime minister, regarding how Israel is going to move forward. And that is really what we expected, is to continue with a more aggressive military response.
Now, we're hearing reports right now that Israel is planning on hitting several more high-rise buildings, and this was something that, triggered, of course, the latest barrage of rockets that we saw aimed towards Tel Aviv and central Israel. What can you tell us about that?
So we can say that Lieutenant General Viv Kochavi said that Israel will continue to strike in a very widespread, vast sort of fashion, and that they are willing and prepared to expand even further. Israel has a very, very large bank of targets, and it appears as though they are going towards maybe not the top level as far as priority targets, but they are striking those high-rise buildings. We already know of one, at least, that was struck earlier today, and according to what we understand, Israel has already, in its procedural fashion, alerted residents from some of these high-rises to vacate the area in a procedure that has really been conducted numerous times, especially in 2014. And those high-rises are definitely those high-profile targets, not just because they may have important assets inside, but also given the fact that this does sort of change the nature of the confrontation from what we've seen in previous escalations that have lasted a few days. Of course, in large-scale operations, you see that happening quite often, but this is already happening just over 24 hours in, and it does appear as though Israel is primed to continue with those large-scale strikes. And as you mentioned, Hamas threatened, if you continue striking these large buildings as well as the PIJ, then Israel will have to suffer the consequences in Tel Aviv.